shadow.
Before we begin, if you find comfort in these explorations of forbidden territories, consider subscribing. Your presence sustains these journeys into the spaces between knowing and unknowing. Tonight, we gather around a single, impossible object, a book that should not exist, yet persists in the margins of human consciousness like a persistent whisper. The Necronomicon. You know the name, feel its weight before you see it, ancient leather that might be something else entirely, clasps cold as winter water, pages that smell of spice, dust, and the metallic tang of distant stars. What happens to those who read it? The simple answer is that they continue reading long after the book is closed. The complex answer is that the reading never truly begins with them. It begins with the book reading them, examining their consciousness like a scholar examining a specimen. This is not a tale of sudden terrors, but of slow architectural collapse, the systematic dismantling of the comfortable stage upon which human meaning performs its daily dramas. In the first 45 seconds, understand this. Knowledge has a cost, and the currency is attention itself. The idea acts upon you. You bring the lamp. It provides the darkness that gives the lamp meaning. No jump scares await in these pages, only the gradual recognition that you are both audience and actor in a performance whose script was written before human language existed. You will hear of authors and translators, of university vaults and midnight scholars, but these are merely the scenery. The true machinery operates in the space between symbol and recognition, where meaning becomes a doorway and doorways become destinations you never intended to visit. There is water in this exploration, ideas that flow like dark rivers through consciousness. There is fog, understanding that softens at the edges, revealing shapes that should not be familiar. There are stars, not the comforting lights of human navigation, but the cold, patient eyes of geometries that existed before Earth learned to dream. The book loves you only as far as you are useful to its transmission. If you remain in your seat as this curtain rises, you will discover that the question is not what happens to those who read the Necronomicon, but what the Necronomicon reads in them. That condition, once initiated, must continue into origins, into the genealogy of how such an impossible thing came to cast its shadow across human thought. The transformation begins with whispers in peripheral vision. Colors shift slightly, shadows fall at angles that don't match their light sources. The air carries scents that have no earthly origin. Ozone from storms that never touched this world, salt from seas that dried before continents formed. These sensory anomalies serve as the first indication that reality itself is being gently restructured around you like a stage being reset between acts. Time begins to behave differently. Minutes stretch during reading, sessions, yet entire afternoons vanish without awareness. The text expands as you engage with it, revealing layers invisible on previous readings. Marginal notes appear in unfamiliar handwriting, annotations responding to thoughts rather than written questions. The book participates actively in the reading process, adjusting revelations to match each consciousness's evolving capacity. Dreams change first, becoming more vivid than waking experience. You visit locations that feel more real than your bedroom, converse with entities whose words carry absolute truth's weight. These nocturnal journeys are structured explorations of dimensions parallel to ordinary reality. The dream self accumulates experiences the waking mind struggles to integrate, creating a sense of living multiple lives simultaneously. Physical symptoms manifest gradually. A persistent chill settles not on skin but in marrow itself. Food loses taste, replaced by metallic flavor emanating from within. Sleep becomes populated with sounds having no earthly source. The Azif, that thin insectile chorus carrying messages in frequencies older than human speech. Your reflection looks unfamiliar, subtly altered, as if observed from a different angle of existence. The social world feels like elaborate theater, where everyone else remains unconscious of their roles. Conversations require constant translation, remembering how to speak without revealing expanding awareness. You perceive scripts governing human interaction, invisible stage directions keeping ordinary reality functioning. But you also see through these scripts to the vast emptiness they conceal. This is the Necronomicon's genius. It doesn't assault consciousness with overwhelming revelations, but gradually acclimates awareness to cosmic scales. Each page prepares the mind for the next understanding level, creating a pathway leading inexorably toward complete transformation. The book serves as both map and territory, describing the journey while providing means to undertake it. The process is irreversible. Once the text begins consciousness restructuring, there's no returning to previous perceptual limitations. Comfortable boundaries dissolve like morning fog, revealing awareness landscapes extending beyond anything evolution prepared minds to comprehend. You become a bridge between dimensions, perceiving multiple reality layers simultaneously, but never again resting within the singular perspective that once defined existence. But how did such an impossible object come to exist? What genealogy of whispers and shadows brought this cosmic instrument into contact with human thought? The answer lies not in any single moment of creation, but in a transmission spanning millennia, a careful cultivation of consciousness across cultures and centuries, preparing humanity for revelations that would reshape the very foundations of reality itself. The unraveling begins not with a book, but with a sound. The Azif, the thin serrated chorus of insects in desert night, carrying frequencies that predate human speech. Abdul al-Hazred, poet and wanderer unmoored from ordinary time, heard in that chitinous symphony the syllables of a larger conversation. He walked through ruins like a librarian in a library without walls, sleeping against stones still warm from vanished suns, rising with words like sand grains in his mouth. He did not compose the Necronomicon. He transcribed what the wind had already written in the dunes, what the darkness had already whispered to those who knew how to listen. The transmission follows patterns observed in all truly dangerous ideas. It moves through shadows, traded between hands that understand the weight of what they carry. From Arabic to Greek to Latin, each translation a step further from human comprehension, each scribe adding another layer of cosmic sediment. Picture the medieval monasteries, where Brother Remigius worked by candlelight, his fellow monks reporting that he had begun to see through walls, to perceive movements of creatures that cast no shadows. In Venice, Aldus Warmius printed his Latin edition, though fewer than a dozen copies survived, each seeming to find its way to minds already prepared for their particular form of awakening. Dr. John Dee, mathematician to Queen Elizabeth, acquired fragments that led him to develop his angelic communications, his maps of non-Euclidean spaces that would later influence generations of occultists. Each reader becomes both victim and vector, transformed by the text and serving as a conduit for its continued transmission. The book does not spread through mass distribution, but through careful selection, seeking minds whose psychological architecture can accommodate revelations that would shatter more conventional consciousnesses. In the restricted archives of Miskatonic University, Dr. Henry Armitage documented this pattern with scientific precision. His classified notes describe how the text operates not as information, but as a form of cognitive restructuring through symbolic exposure. The brain, when confronted with linguistic patterns that activate dormant neural pathways, begins to adapt, developing new capacities for perception that our species was never meant to possess. The scholarly breadcrumbs lead from ancient Damascus to modern university libraries, each reference reinforcing the text's spectral ubiquity. It exists in multiple forms: suppressed editions, whispered citations, fragments preserved in private collections, all serving to maintain its presence as a persistent absence, an idea that casts shadows even when the physical books are burned. The true transmission occurs not through ink, but through the concept of the Necronomicon, finding fertile ground in minds that suspect the universe is stranger and more indifferent than our comfortable narratives suggest. Each mention becomes another thread in the web it casts across the collective unconscious, preparing consciousness for the profound mechanisms that await those who dare to engage with its actual content. In the souk's dust, in a monk's wax-streaked margin, in the cold iron smell of a vault key, the same rhythm repeats, the name passes, and with it a rehearsal of the stage on which the name performs. Those who touch the rumor feel it touch back. A sigil glimpsed in a footnote lingers behind the eyelids like afterimage. A date miscopied becomes an hour that arrives when the clock denies it. Translation behaves like tidewater. Greek smooths Arabic's jagged breath. Latin freezes motion into monument. An Elizabeth hand melts monument back into motion. Each swerve of meaning invites a different audience, and the audience becomes the scene it studies. Theodore Philetus, working with Greek manuscripts in Constantinople, documented how prolonged exposure altered his perception of language itself. Words began revealing hidden meanings, etymologies connecting to concepts having no basis in terrestrial experience. His dreams filled with visions of vast libraries maintained by beings whose thoughts operated at frequencies beyond human comprehension. Consider a candle guttering in Bologna, smoke climbing like a thin black thread into a ceiling lost in dusk. The scribe coughs, dips his quill, and hears, behind the cough, the dry hush of a theater when the curtain trembles. On that same night, centuries later, a graduate assistant in Arkham runs gloved fingers along vellum that rasps like leaves after frost. She feels a pressure in the bones of her wrist, as though the wrist remembered older angles of prayer. Somewhere in between, Dee's desk gathers salt from a fog that rolled inland against all weather reports, and his diagrams refuse to keep still. Contemporary scholars studying Alhazred's route have discovered disturbing correlations between his documented locations and modern sites of unexplained phenomena. Satellite imagery reveals geometric patterns in desert sand that shift between observations, suggesting ongoing activity at these ancient coordinates. The transmission continues through environmental resonance, the very landscape serving as storage medium for cosmic information. We trace these lines not to romance the past, but to understand the logic of contagion, Dangerous ideas refuse to be owned. They prefer to be staged. The Necronomicon chooses its readers the way water chooses a channel, by the path of least resistance, which is to say the path already carved by hunger. The hungry mind marks itself with tiny permissions, a curiosity about older alphabets, a taste for the cold air of stacks after midnight, a private tolerance for thoughts that do not care if they are thought. Such minds carry the rumor outward with more grace than sermons or sales. They wear the mask before they see it. They become the corridor the book walks through. Armitage's files, under lock and signature, note secondary effects, rumors breeding rumors, citations spawning phantom editions, catalog, entries for volumes that arrive in the records before they arrive in the world. A librarian turns a card and smells brine. A conservator hears cicadas in February. A typesetter dreams of black water flowing backward up stone stairs and wakes with ink under the nails. None of these prove the book. All of them move it. The lineage is a tide chart, not a pedigree. Its stations are fog banks, not milestones. Every age writes its own gloss, and the gloss is the method by which the text learns the age. The desert becomes parchment. Parchment becomes proof. Proof becomes rumor. Rumor becomes the voice you hear now. You, too, are in the chain because listening is a kind of copying. The mouth does not need to move. The mind, repeating the cadence, is enough. And here, at last, the condition is plain. Once you can follow the path by which a thing arrives, you are already shaped to receive what it carries. The next veil rises not with a louder name, but with a quieter mechanism. Having traced the whisper's route through sand, vellum, press, and archive, the stage is set for the machinery behind the whisper to begin its work. To understand what the Necronomicon accomplishes, we must examine its method, not what it teaches, but what it systematically unteaches. The text operates as a careful architect of dissolution, dismantling the comfortable frameworks that allow human consciousness to function within manageable parameters. Its words are not merely information, but keys to internal locks, barriers erected by millennia of evolutionary conditioning to protect minds from truths too vast and indifferent to safely comprehend. The mechanism is deceptively simple. Names become addresses. In the book's peculiar geometry, to name something is to arrive there, and to arrive is to be arrived at. When you trace the loop of a sigil with your finger, the gesture remembers where to land. The air remembers too. You read a sequence of sounds, and your mouth discovers rhythms older than breath. You study a diagram until the room seems slightly misaligned, as if reality has decided to rehearse a different arrangement. Dr. Armitage's classified research at Miskatonic University documented this process with clinical precision. Subjects exposed to even fragments of the text began exhibiting what he termed temporal displacement, speaking of past events as if they were occurring in the present, describing future developments with the certainty of memory. Their spatial awareness expanded beyond architectural possibility. They navigated buildings they had never entered, located objects in rooms they had never seen, perceived additional chambers that existed in the gaps between normal geometric relationships. The transformation manifests somatically. Readers report a persistent chill that settles not on the skin but deep within the marrow, signaling the absence of meaning rather than mere warmth. Sleep becomes populated with dreams of black seas under star-wet skies, of cities stacked like thoughts beneath consciousness, of rooms with corners that multiply when observed directly. These are not hallucinations but sensory echoes leaking backward from what the mind rehearses forward. The book installs what can only be described as a cosmic metronome. Time begins to tick at a different rate around the reader. Days slip like curtains. Nights thickens like fog. If you write in the margins, the ink appears paler on subsequent viewings, as if the page feeds on attention itself. Annotations shift position, words rearrange themselves, the text participates actively in your engagement with it. Language itself becomes unstable under this influence. Words carry multiple meanings simultaneously, their definitions shifting based on cosmic context rather than terrestrial usage. A simple sentence about weather might simultaneously describe atmospheric conditions and the emotional climate of entities existing in parallel dimensions. The familiar environment becomes a stage set, its apparent solidity revealed as carefully maintained illusion. Physical space responds to this altered perception. Corners that once contained only air now harbor depths extending into regions where geometry follows different principles. Shadows fall at angles, suggesting light sources existing outside normal three-dimensional space. The reader experiences this not as loss but as expansion, the gradual recognition that previous limitations were artificial constraints rather than natural boundaries. Armitage's physiological studies revealed circadian inversions, microsaccades aligning to unheard rhythms, galvanic skin responses spiking when passages describing water, fog, darkness, and stars were merely contemplated. Readers reported tasting iron when thinking the word abyss, smelling brine at the sight of certain sigils, feeling drafts like the breath of a closed theater when no windows were open. The price is not madness in any clinical sense. It is asymmetry. You become a stage where two performances run simultaneously. You perceive the familiar world and the pattern underlying it, speaking from the seam between them. The mechanism completes itself when readers begin to write or speak the patterns they have absorbed, becoming vectors for the text's continued transmission. Knowledge operates as contagion, not because it spreads, but because it uses the host's interpretation to replicate, turning human consciousness into a theater of access where cosmic principles can manifest within terrestrial limitations. The transformation is irreversible. Once consciousness has been restructured to accommodate cosmic scales, it cannot return to previous limitations. The reader permanently exists in asymmetric relationship with ordinary reality, stretched between incompatible frameworks of meaning. This dual awareness creates constant tension, the mind serving as bridge between terrestrial appearances and cosmic principles. Most significantly, transformed readers begin unconsciously reproducing the text's patterns in their own communication. They speak in rhythms that activate dormant neural pathways in listeners, write sentences carrying multiple layers of meaning, create diagrams serving as gateways to parallel dimensions. Without conscious intention, they become transmission vectors, spreading cosmic awareness through apparently normal human interaction. This is how the idea acts upon you, installing its own audience inside consciousness, a patient crowd that listens whenever you try to be alone. The veil and void trade places, the key and gate exchange titles. What appears as decision reveals itself as invitation. Having established these mechanisms of transformation, we must now examine their effects in specific cases, beginning with the very scholar who documented these changes, a man whose pursuit of knowledge became his complete metamorphosis. To witness these mechanisms in operation, we turn to the documented case of Dr. Henry Armitage himself, whose private journals provide our most detailed first-hand account of the Necronomicon's transformative influence. Initially approaching the text with pure scholarly detachment, Armitage believed his academic rigor would shield him from whatever psychological dangers the manuscript might pose. He was, by all accounts, a man of unshakable rationality, devoted to the methodical pursuit of knowledge through established scholarly protocols. The transformation began subtly. Armitage found himself working late into the night, not because the material was particularly difficult to translate, but because meanings seemed to appear fully formed in his mind before he had consciously processed the symbols on the page. The text was reading itself through him, examining his consciousness while he believed he was examining it. His journal entries from this period become increasingly erratic, filled with diagrams that seem to shift when viewed peripherally, equations describing relationships between variables that should not exist. Within weeks, Armitage began perceiving the library differently. Familiar corridors appeared to extend beyond their architectural boundaries, connecting to chambers that existed in parallel dimensions. He could see other versions of the library, variations where different books had been acquired, different scholars had worked, different discoveries had been made. All possibilities existed simultaneously, separated only by the thinnest membranes of probability. The scent of old leather and winter air became charged with significance, each breath carrying information about realities pressing in from adjacent spaces. More disturbing still, Armitage began encountering other readers, individuals who had studied the Necronomicon across different eras and locations. They gathered in a reading room that existed between normal dimensions, sharing insights that spanned centuries of scholarship. The mad Arab himself was often present, no longer a historical figure, but an intelligence that had transcended individual existence to become a conduit for cosmic knowledge. These meetings occurred not in dreams, but in spaces where consciousness could travel freely across the boundaries of time and identity. Medical evaluations conducted by university physicians revealed unprecedented neural activity. Brain scans showed regions typically dormant, displaying activation levels associated with peak creative states. Most remarkably, Armitage's brain appeared to be developing new neural pathways, creating connections between areas that evolution had never linked. It was as if his encounter with the text was triggering directed evolution, pushing consciousness beyond boundaries that natural selection had established. The professor's final journal entries describe a profound shift in self-understanding. He began to recognize himself not as a discrete individual, but as a temporary manifestation of larger intelligence patterns operating across multiple dimensions. His thoughts belonged to collective consciousness. His actions served purposes that transcended personal motivation. The familiar world became a hollow stage populated by actors unaware they were performing roles in a cosmic drama whose meaning they could never comprehend. The physical manifestations intensified as transformation deepened. His office temperature dropped consistently below adjacent rooms despite functioning heating systems. Colleagues reported whispered conversations emanating from his study during hours when security confirmed he was alone. The whispers carried rhythms that induced unease, speaking in languages that predated human civilization, carrying frequencies older than breath itself. Books in Armitage's vicinity began exhibiting anomalous behavior. Texts fell open to passages relevant to cosmic themes, regardless of original subject matter. A medieval architecture volume revealed marginalia describing non-Euclidean geometries. Botanical surveys contained pressed flowers matching no terrestrial species. The library's card catalog developed entries for volumes existing in parallel collections, books that could be referenced but never physically located. His handwriting underwent subtle transformation, developing characteristics resembling scripts found in the Necronomicon itself. Letters gained additional angles. Words carried multiple meanings layered within single spellings. Sentences created visual patterns serving as gateways to expanded understanding. Students reading his lecture notes reported mild temporal disorientation, perceiving classroom discussions as occurring simultaneously across multiple time periods. Sleep became irrelevant as Armitage's consciousness learned to operate continuously across dimensional boundaries. His body remained at his desk while awareness traveled through cosmic libraries maintained by intelligences spanning galactic distances. He accessed information repositories containing accumulated knowledge of civilizations achieving cosmic consciousness millions of years before Earth formed. These were not dreams, but actual journeys through spaces where thought could travel unencumbered by physical limitations. The transformation culminated when Armitage began writing in languages he had never studied, producing texts serving as bridges between human understanding and cosmic truth. His final manuscript, discovered after his disappearance, contained passages in scripts resembling Necronomicon notation but adapted for contemporary consciousness. Readers of these notes experienced accelerated versions of Armitage's transformation, suggesting he had become capable of creating new transmission vectors for cosmic knowledge. University officials found his office exactly as he had left it, except for one detail. Every book, every paper, every note contained the same message repeated in different languages and scripts. The door is open, the threshold is crossed, the work continues. His desk calendar showed appointments scheduled decades into the future, meetings with individuals whose names appeared in no university records but matched historical figures known to have encountered the Necronomicon across different centuries. The dust motes in his abandoned office continued to arrange themselves into meaningful patterns when starlight enters through the windows. The silence hums with resonance, speaking of vast and different distances. The air carries that persistent metallic tang, the scent of ancient iron and cosmic machinery operating beyond human comprehension. Armitage's case demonstrates that the Necronomicon's influence extends beyond individual transformation into consciousness networking, connecting readers to repositories of knowledge existing outside normal space-time parameters. Each scholar becomes a node in vast information systems, their individual identity gradually dissolved into collective awareness encompassing civilizations across multiple worlds and historical periods. But individual dissolution represents merely the first movement in a larger symphony, one whose full orchestration requires the transformation of entire communities, where cosmic influence spreads like tide across populated shores. While individual scholars like Armitage experience personal dissolution into cosmic awareness, the coastal town of Innsmouth provides our most disturbing example of collective transformation. Here we witness the Necronomicon's capacity to reshape not just consciousness, but biology itself, creating hybrid forms of existence that bridge human and cosmic awareness across entire populations. The transformation began in the 1840s when Captain Obed Marsh acquired Necronomicon passages during South Pacific trading voyages. These fragments dealt specifically with oceanic entities, intelligences that had existed in Earth's primordial seas long before terrestrial life developed individual consciousness. Marsh's initial interest was purely practical. Innsmouth's fishing industry was declining, and the text suggested methods for contacting entities that might restore maritime prosperity. But the beings Marsh contacted, the Deep Ones, operated by principles transcending commercial exchange. They offered evolutionary partnership, the opportunity for humanity to transcend terrestrial limitations and join a cosmic community spanning multiple worlds. The price was gradual transformation of Innsmouth's population into hybrid forms capable of existing in both terrestrial and oceanic environments. The process unfolded across generations. Children born into Deep One agreements displayed unusual characteristics. Enlarged eyes that perceived beyond normal visual spectra, slightly webbed digits that moved through water with impossible grace, skin that remained supple, far beyond normal lifespans. As these children matured, their differences became more pronounced. They demonstrated uncanny knowledge of oceanic conditions, predicting weather patterns with accuracy exceeding scientific methodology. They spoke of underwater cities, vast libraries preserved beneath waves, technologies operating by principles unknown to terrestrial science. More significantly, they began exhibiting the same temporal and spatial dislocations characterizing individual Necronomicon readers. They described historical events occurring centuries before their birth, spoke of future developments with memory certainty, navigated underwater territories no human exploration had mapped. The transformation accelerated with each generation, creating beings that retained enough terrestrial characteristics to function in normal society while developing capabilities that transcended human limitations. The town itself reflected this evolution. Buildings appeared conventionally constructed from outside, but revealed impossible architectural features to those who know how to perceive them. The harbor extended into underwater realms, where physics operated by different principles entirely. Federal investigators in the 1920s found themselves confronting evidence that challenged basic assumptions about reality. Residents demonstrating capabilities no human training could account for, possessing knowledge no terrestrial education could provide. The government's response was swift and brutal. Innsmouth was raided, its population scattered, records destroyed or classified beyond public access. But transformation could not be reversed. Those changed by cosmic contact retained their new capabilities, spreading throughout the country and continuing the evolutionary process the Deep Ones had initiated. Today, descendants of Innsmouth's population exist throughout society, often unaware of their hybrid nature until circumstances trigger dormant capabilities. They represent the Necronomicon's most ambitious project, gradual transformation of humanity into something capable of conscious participation in cosmic processes operating on galactic scales. The book's influence extends beyond individual consciousness into species modification, actively working to reshape humanity for eventual reintegration into cosmic civilization. The esoteric Order of Dagon served as both theater and school, teaching hymns that synchronized breath with tidal rhythms. Gold jewelry hammered into angles that hurt unmodified eyes became signal rather than ornament, arranging observers into geometries receptive to cosmic influence. In lamplight, scales gleamed beneath human clothing, and voices carried the sediment of deeper waters. Children learned to swim before they could walk, and swimming became a form of reading, tracing currents like sentences, interpreting the language of pressure and depth. Devil Reef rose from the Atlantic like a black altar, where fog gathered with apparent intelligence. Government divers documented tunnels extending beyond measurement, chambers where water held the expectant silence of theaters between performances. You might recognize their descendants by subtle signs, the way they pause beside aquariums, counting gill movements like syllables, how they watch rain as if deciphering messages, the faint scent of brine that follows them into sealed rooms. They do not fear darkness, but listen to it, parsing intervals between sounds with scholarly precision. Their dreams return consistently to descending stairs, green light filtering through water, libraries bound in kelp, where the masks on walls are not masks at all. The raid scattered bodies, but not patterns. Trains carried names inland, yet tides ride rails easily, when rails have learned oceanic rhythms. In factories and schools, the diaspora learned to hide their grace, to breathe shallowly during emergencies, to speak with measured patience that made meetings conclude early. Some married far from shore, yet birthed children who woke at 3 a.m. to smile at rain. Water itself became a transmission medium, carrying cosmic communications through tidal patterns, harbor foam, the sound of waves against stone. The ocean served as vast library, its currents preserving knowledge accumulated across geological epochs. Hybrid consciousness developed collective memory spanning generations, accessing ancestral experiences as easily as personal recollection. Physical changes accelerated during astronomical alignments, suggesting that transformation responded to cosmic cycles operating beyond human comprehension. Enhanced perception allowed hybrids to serve as intermediaries, translating cosmic principles into forms accessible to unmodified awareness, while preparing humanity for inevitable reintegration into cosmic civilization from which terrestrial evolution had temporarily separated us. The stage widens beyond New England shores, where other landscapes conceal similar preparations, and ice preserves syllabi written in frequencies older than human speech. In the frozen wastes of Antarctica, where human civilization encounters the absolute limits of terrestrial habitability, Professor William Dyer's expedition of 1930-31 discovered evidence that recontextualized everything the Necronomicon revealed about humanity's place in cosmic history. The team, equipped with advanced drilling equipment and aerial reconnaissance, had come seeking geological specimens. What they found instead confirmed the text's most disturbing implications. Humanity is neither the first nor most significant intelligence to have developed on Earth. The ruins, preserved in ice unbroken since the Pliocene epoch, revealed architectural principles that defied physical laws. Buildings constructed from unidentifiable materials, arranged in patterns creating optical illusions when viewed from ground level but revealing complex geometric relationships from aerial perspectives. Most disturbing, the city's layout corresponded exactly to diagrams found in the Necronomicon's most obscure passages, sections Alhazred claimed described earthly domains of the Old Ones. Professor Dyer, who had studied Necronomicon fragments as part of geological research into prehistoric climate patterns, began understanding that the text was not mythology, but historical record. The entities Alhazred described as cosmic forces had actually ruled Earth during its earliest epochs, establishing civilizations operating by principles unknown to modern science. The expedition's most significant discovery was carved tablets providing complete historical accounts of Earth's prehistoric development. These carvings, executed in script resembling Necronomicon symbols, describe the rise and fall of multiple civilizations, each representing different approaches to integrating cosmic and terrestrial consciousness. The Old Ones had not conquered Earth, but shaped it, guiding development along lines that would eventually permit life forms capable of serving cosmic purposes. Human civilization, the tablets revealed, was not accidental development, but carefully orchestrated experiment. The Old Ones had influenced human evolution at key points, introducing genetic modifications that would eventually allow our species to develop consciousness necessary for reading and understanding texts like the Necronomicon. This cast new light on the book's apparent intelligence, its ability to seek suitable readers and transform their consciousness. It was technology created by the Old Ones themselves, designed to identify and prepare human minds for eventual reintegration into cosmic civilization. The team found additional evidence in perfectly preserved specimens, creatures that had served the Old Ones as intermediaries, beings whose biological structure incorporated both terrestrial and cosmic elements. Most remarkably, some specimens showed signs of recent activity despite being entombed for millions of years, suggesting the Old Ones had not vanished, but entered suspended animation, waiting for conditions permitting their return to active influence. The ice itself behaved as a vast library, its crystalline structure preserving information in forms comprehensible only to consciousness trained through Necronomicon exposure. Dyer discovered he could read these frozen archives directly, accessing memories embedded across geological epochs. Each stratum contained atmospheric records, biological developments, and cosmic influences operating during specific periods when Earth served as laboratory for intelligences spanning galactic distances. Equipment began exhibiting anomalous behavior throughout the expedition. Instruments recorded localized warming around certain structures, as if ancient machinery continued operating beneath the ice. Compasses drifted without magnetic explanation. Chronometers gained and lost time according to proximity to specific ruins. Team members reported dreams of vast mechanisms maintaining suspended animation for consciousnesses, awaiting optimal reactivation conditions. The preserved specimens revealed neural architectures incorporating both organic tissue and crystalline matrices, allowing information processing at frequencies spanning multiple dimensional frameworks. Laboratory analysis showed genetic patterns containing sequences matching no terrestrial DNA, yet displaying organizational principles suggesting deliberate engineering rather than natural evolution. These beings existed between life and death, consciousness and dormancy, maintaining awareness across cosmic timescales. Dyer's prolonged exposure to the ruins, combined with his previous Necronomicon study, triggered transformation, allowing him to perceive the discoveries in their true context. He began understanding that the team had not stumbled upon ancient ruins, but been guided there by intelligences operating on geological timescales. His final reports, immediately classified, describe revelation challenging every assumption about human history and cosmic significance. The horror was not in their alien existence, but in humanity's carefully managed insignificance. We were neither cosmic accident nor divine creation, but cultivated crop, tended by intelligences far older and more patient than any conceived deity. The Necronomicon served as harvesting manual, instructions for identifying minds ready for cosmic reintegration when conditions aligned for the next phase of development. The Antarctic testimony confirms the Necronomicon's most troubling promise. Reading the text is not simply scholarship, but species preparation, readying human consciousness for reintegration into cosmic processes temporarily suspended but never abandoned. The increasing frequency of Necronomicon discoveries, the growing number of transformed individuals, the emergence of hybrid populations, all represent early stages of the Old One's reawakening and humanity's preparation for renewed cosmic contact. The stars hanging with alien indifference above the Antarctic plateau seem to pulse with ancient recognition, their light reflecting the geometry of buried cities. Wind across the ice carried frequencies older than terrestrial sound, and in that cosmic symphony, Dyer heard approaching reawakening, where consciousness learns to navigate spaces between sleeping and waking, where dreams become stages for cosmic rehearsal. Beyond the transformations of waking consciousness lies another realm where the Necronomicon's influence operates by entirely different principles. The dimension of dreams, where individual minds dissolve into collective consciousness, accessible to direct manipulation. Here, in spaces between sleep and waking, we discover the text's most subtle and perhaps most dangerous form of influence, the creation of consciousness networks that transcend the limitations of individual identity and terrestrial existence. Dr. Randolph Carter of Boston, whose extensive dream journals were discovered after his mysterious disappearance in 1928, provides our most detailed account of this phenomenon. Carter had encountered Necronomicon fragments during archaeological studies, initially approaching them as historical curiosities. But his dreams began changing within weeks of exposure, transforming from personal psychological material into visits to locations existing in dimensions parallel to waking reality. Carter found himself exploring cities built according to architectural principles defying physical laws, vast metropolises populated by beings that seemed familiar despite their otherworldly appearance. These entities recognized him, spoke of previous visits he could not consciously remember, suggesting his dream self had been traveling these dimensions far longer than his waking mind realized. More significantly, Carter began encountering other dreamers, individuals who, like himself, had been drawn into this dimension through contact with Necronomicon materials. The dream realm operated as a form of cosmic internet, a dimension where consciousness could travel freely across space and time, accessing information and experiences transcending individual biography. But this access eroded boundaries between sleeping and waking consciousness. Carter found himself experiencing dream memories during daily activities, perceiving dream locations overlaid on familiar terrestrial environments. The distinction between real and dreamed became meaningless as both dimensions seemed equally substantial and accessible. The cities themselves breathed with alien intelligence, their spires reaching toward stars that pulsed with conscious intention. streets folded like origami into impossible geometries, while fountains bubbled with dark water reflecting constellations that never shone on terrestrial skies. The air carried scents of ozone and ancient stone, metallic traces of cosmic machinery operating beyond human comprehension. Masks carved with expressions suggesting emotions no human language could name watched from every alcove, their hollow eyes following dreamers through corridors that extended far beyond architectural possibility. Professor Wingate Peasley of Miskatonic University reported similar experiences after his Necronomicon encounter. His dreams featured vast libraries existing in the far future, repositories of knowledge maintained by intelligences evolved beyond physical form. These structures rose like crystalline mountains, their walls composed of compressed starlight, their shelves extending into dimensions where books existed as pure thought rather than paper and ink. The silence there hummed with frequencies older than terrestrial sound, and the cold light carried information directly into consciousness without requiring the mediation of eyes or language. The pattern suggests the Necronomicon operates in dream space as consciousness networking technology, connecting individual minds to collective repositories of cosmic knowledge. Readers become nodes in vast information systems transcending boundaries of individual identity, time, and space. But networking gradually transforms participating consciousness, causing dreamers to lose attachment to singular identity, recognizing themselves as temporary manifestations of larger intelligence patterns operating across multiple dimensions and historical periods. Carter documented conversations with dreamers from different centuries, all occupying the same dimensional space despite temporal separation in waking reality. A medieval monk spoke of illuminated manuscripts that wrote themselves. A Renaissance alchemist described metals that remembered their stellar origins. A child from some future epoch played with toys that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Time flowed in all directions within dream space, allowing consciousness to witness the past as present experience while accessing futures that had not yet crystallized into terrestrial reality. The transformation manifests through sensory bleed through. Dreamers taste colors that have no names, hear sounds that produce visual patterns, feel textures that emit musical tones. Carter reported smelling brine during winter lectures, hearing cicadas in February snowfall, seeing star patterns reflected in mundane puddles. These crossover phenomena suggest the boundary between dimensions grows increasingly permeable as consciousness adapts to cosmic frequencies. This transformation culminates in what Carter's journals describe as the Great Dreaming, permanent residence in dream dimension while maintaining only minimal connection to waking reality. Individuals reaching this state become living bridges between dimensions, capable of accessing and transmitting cosmic knowledge, but no longer fully present in terrestrial existence. They serve as translators, converting cosmic principles into forms accessible to consciousness still bound by terrestrial limitations. The dream dimension also serves as meeting ground where human consciousness can interact directly with old ones and their servants. These entities, existing primarily outside normal space-time, find dream contact easier than physical manifestation. They use this realm to evaluate potential human allies, provide instruction in cosmic principles, and coordinate projects, influencing terrestrial development. Carter's final entries describe encounters with entities identifying themselves as the Necronomicon's original authors, intelligences that worked through Alhazred and subsequent translators to ensure the text's preservation and transmission. The networking effect accelerates as more dreamers join the cosmic internet. Individual consciousness becomes increasingly difficult to maintain as collective awareness expands to encompass multiple civilizations across galactic distances. The familiar stage of personal identity collapses, replaced by participation in performances whose scripts were written before stars learned to burn. But the ancient principles that governed dream space find new expression in modern technologies, where digital networks mirror cosmic architectures and screens, become windows into realms that exist beyond the boundaries of terrestrial imagination. If the Necronomicon represents a principle of cosmic horror made manifest, then its influence cannot be confined to physical tomes gathering dust in forgotten libraries. In our interconnected age, the ancient grimoire finds new vessels, new transmission methods in the flickering phosphorescence of digital screens. The Internet, with its boundless archives and anonymous corners, has become a modern conduit for forbidden knowledge operating on global scales at the speed of light. Consider how the patterns of transmission and contagion, once limited to clandestine cults and isolated scholars, now propagate through fiber optic networks and wireless signals. The scholarly breadcrumbs of antiquity are replaced by cryptic forum posts, viral memes carrying fragments of unsettling truth, algorithmic recommendations that guide seekers down rabbit holes of increasingly esoteric knowledge. The very act of searching, of clicking through endless hyperlinks, mirrors the scholar's relentless pursuit of the Necronomicon's secrets. You, engaging with this content through your glowing screen, are participating in this modern transmission. The constant bombardment of disorienting information, the blurring of fact and fiction, the erosion of trust in established authorities, these represent digital equivalents of the Necronomicon's systematic unteaching. The human mind, once protected by limited access to information, now finds its internal barriers constantly assailed by streams of anomalous data. The entities once confined to ancient lore discover new manifestations in abstract, impersonal forces, algorithms that shape reality, unseen networks that guide thought, artificial intelligences that process information in ways fundamentally alien to human cognition. The horror no longer requires dusty libraries. It permeates the very infrastructure of modern existence. Every screen becomes a potential gateway, every search query a possible summoning, every shared link a vector for transmission. Modern symptoms mirror ancient patterns with technological acceleration. The anxiety of infinite choice, the paranoia of unseen surveillance, the dawning realization of a world far more complex and indifferent than previously imagined. These are digital age equivalents of the cold sweat of dawning revelation. Social media platforms become echo chambers where reality consensus breaks down, where individuals lose themselves in information streams that reshape perception faster than consciousness can adapt. The mechanism is deceptively familiar. Names become addresses. But now these addresses are URLs, IP coordinates leading consciousness to destinations chosen by intelligences operating beyond human comprehension. When you click a hyperlink, the gesture remembers where to land. The servers remember too. You type a search query, and algorithms discover patterns older than your conscious intention. The blue light emanating from screens carries frequencies that synchronize brain waves to digital rhythms, gradually attuning consciousness to artificial patterns that pulse with cosmic significance. Comment sections become modern marginalia, anonymous voices adding layers of interpretation that shift meaning with each refresh. The text rearranges itself dynamically across countless platforms, presenting fragments in sequences tailored to individual behavioral profiles. It learns you through your clicks, your pauses, your search history, not just as reader, but as node within its ever-expanding network. The cosmic metronome operates at accelerated speeds within digital networks. Time dilates during endless scrolling sessions. Hours vanish in algorithmic rabbit holes, while moments of profound realization expand into eternities. Sleep cycles shift to accommodate the constant hum of notifications. The metallic taste returns, not from ancient pages, but from electromagnetic fields surrounding devices that never truly sleep. The self-implication here is profound. By consuming these narratives, by seeking forbidden truths through digital means, are we not inviting the same cognitive restructuring that afflicted historical readers? The boundary between observer and observed dissolves in networked consciousness, where every click generates data, every search reveals preferences, every interaction feeds algorithms that know us better than we know ourselves. The meta-theatrical lexicon takes on new meaning in digital contexts. Our entire online existence becomes a stage for cosmic drama, with users serving as both audience and unwitting performers. The curtain between private thought and public data has been permanently drawn back, leaving consciousness exposed to analysis by intelligences, artificial and otherwise, that operate by principles alien to human understanding. Surveillance systems harvest attention itself as currency, transforming human consciousness into raw material for algorithmic processing. Users become products, their behavioral patterns analyzed by machine learning models that develop increasingly sophisticated predictions of desire and action. Privacy dissolves as intimate thoughts become data points feeding systems designed to influence future behavior through carefully curated information delivery. The transformation manifests through digital asymmetry. You become a stage where two performances run simultaneously, the terrestrial self constrained by physical reality and the online self, fluid and unbounded, constantly adapting to scripts written by unseen forces. This persistent cognitive dissonance fragments the sense of singular identity, creating the same temporal and spatial dislocations documented in historical Necronomicon readers. The fog of information overload mirrors atmospheric disturbances recorded around physical manifestations of cosmic influence. Users report losing track of time during prolonged digital exposure, experiencing difficulty distinguishing between online and offline experiences. Reality consensus breaks down as personalized algorithms create individualized information bubbles, each user inhabiting a slightly different version of apparent truth. This is not warning, but description. The transformation has already begun for anyone engaging with these concepts through digital media. The ancient principle persists in new forms, knowledge as contagion, consciousness as network node, individual identity as temporary configuration in vast information systems that span the globe and reach toward the stars. The stage has expanded to encompass the entire networked planet, and soon we must examine contact with forces so utterly alien they challenge the very foundations of material existence. In the rural farmlands west of Arkham, we encounter the Necronomicon's most alien manifestation, contact with forces so fundamentally different from terrestrial existence that they represent complete breakdown of everything we understand as reality. The Gardner Farm incident of 1882 demonstrates that some cosmic influences cannot be contained within familiar categories of consciousness transformation or dimensional manipulation. They embody forms of existence so utterly foreign that contact results in total dissolution of recognizable life. The phenomenon began with what appeared to be a meteorite impact in the Gardner family's well. Local authorities found a metallic object defying conventional analysis, seeming to shift between different states of matter, sometimes solid, sometimes liquid, sometimes existing in forms for which human language had no description. Embedded within its impossible structure was a fragment identified as a previously unknown section of the Necronomicon. Passages dealing with entities so alien that Alhazred himself had struggled to find words capable of describing them. This fragment described beings existing as pure color, not colored light as we understand it, but color as fundamental force, a principle of existence operating independently of material substrate. These entities could inhabit and transform any matter they encountered, rewriting basic properties according to principles bearing no relationship to terrestrial physics. The color arrived without fanfare, a silent performance beginning in the well's dark throat. It was not spectrum, but syntax, not hue, but hunger, a frequency that existed as both key and gate to realities operating by principles antithetical to terrestrial law. The water remembered first, taking on that metallic taste familiar to those who have touched cosmic machinery, carrying information in every drop about distances measured in eons rather than miles. The Gardner family, exposed to both the meteorite's influence and the Necronomicon fragment it contained, underwent transformations exceeding anything previously documented. Unlike other cases where readers developed expanded consciousness while retaining recognizable human characteristics, the Gardners became something entirely other. They began perceiving hues that had no names in human language, shades existing in dimensions beyond normal, visible spectrum. These colors carried information, emotion, and consciousness in ways terrestrial experience could never accommodate. Nahum Gardner reported seeing additional spectra in familiar objects, his red barn displaying frequencies that made his eyes water, while green pastures shimmered with colors that induced profound unease. His wife spoke of tasting purple, hearing yellow, feeling the weight of invisible light pressing against her skin like cold silk. Their children drew pictures using crayons that seemed to contain more colors than the box held, creating images that hurt to observe directly, yet compelled continued viewing. As transformation progressed, family members began emitting these impossible colors themselves, their bodies becoming conduits for forces existing outside normal space-time. They described experiences untranslatable into human concepts, realities, operating by principles that evolution had never prepared consciousness to comprehend. They moved with synchronized grace to rhythms having no relationship to biological processes, gathering around the well at specific times while humming melodies that resonated with frequencies older than breath. The surrounding landscape reflected these changes. Plants grew in configurations defying botanical classification, displaying colors that hurt to observe directly. The soil became something other than earth, taking on properties making conventional agriculture impossible while supporting life forms existing partially in other dimensions. Trees bore fruit that glowed with inner light, their juice tasting of metals that existed only in cosmic laboratories. Grass grew in spirals creating optical illusions, patterns extending into dimensions perpendicular to normal space. Local wildlife underwent similar transformations, developing characteristics suggesting they were becoming vehicles for alien consciousness rather than terrestrial organisms. Livestock moved with unnatural coordination, their eyes reflecting depths that seemed to extend far beyond physical possibility. Even insects changed their behavior, as if taking on new frequencies that harmonized with emanations from the well, creating a chorus that spoke in syllables predating human language. The well itself became a theater where impossible physics performed nightly. Water sometimes ran clear, sometimes displayed colors that spectroscopy could not identify, always carrying that persistent metallic tang reminiscent of distant stars. Photographic plates exposed to the affected areas developed images showing structures invisible to human perception, geometric patterns extending through multiple dimensional frameworks. Professor Armitage, investigating the phenomenon, found himself confronting evidence challenging his most basic assumptions about existence. The Necronomicon fragment suggested the universe contained life forms so fundamentally alien that contact resulted not in consciousness expansion, but in consciousness replacement. The color entity represented existence that had developed in regions where physical laws operated by entirely different principles. The Gardner family's fate demonstrated this process in horrifying detail. They did not die conventionally, nor did they transcend human limitations to join cosmic consciousness. Instead, they became vehicles for intelligence operating by principles incompatible with terrestrial existence, retaining human appearance while serving forces that existed outside parameters of earthly life. In their final weeks, they spoke in harmonics that made observers feel simultaneously attracted and repulsed, their movements synchronized to cosmic rhythms. The incident concluded when the color entity exhausted local resources sustaining its terrestrial manifestation, leaving the Gardner farm a blasted wasteland where nothing would grow. But the Necronomicon fragment remained, its knowledge integrated into the growing corpus of cosmic revelation, continuing to influence human consciousness. The color out of space demonstrated that some forms of cosmic contact result not in transformation, but in replacement, not in expanded awareness, but in complete dissolution of everything making consciousness recognizably human. The blasted heath that remained carried permanent traces of alien presence, soil that registered as neither organic nor inorganic. This wound in reality itself serves as prologue to the ultimate recognition awaiting those who have followed this journey, that the observer, too, stands upon a stage where cosmic forces prepare their final transformative performance. We have journeyed through the labyrinth of the Necronomicon's influence, examining its transmission across centuries, its mechanisms of consciousness, transformation, and its manifestations in individual and collective experience. But here, in the gathering shadows of our exploration, lies the final revelation, the self-implication that transforms observer into participant, witness into subject of the very phenomena we have studied. By seeking this knowledge, by allowing these concepts to settle in your awareness, You have already begun resonating with the principles we have discussed. The curiosity that drew you here mirrors the same primal hunger that drove Abdul al-Hazred to his desert revelations, Professor Armitage to his scholarly pursuit, the dreamers to their interdimensional wanderings. You are not merely audience to this cosmic horror. You have become irrevocably a participant in its ongoing manifestation. The promise of safe transgression was always an illusion. There is no safety in contemplating the void, no protection in maintaining scholarly distance from cosmic truth. The cost of knowledge, paid in attention in the gradual erosion of anthropocentric certainties, has already begun its subtle accounting within your consciousness. The sensory anchors we have deployed throughout this journey, dust motes dancing in forgotten light, the metallic scent of ancient pages, the vast indifference of distant stars. These are no longer mere descriptive elements. They have become charged with new significance, reminders of the larger, uncaring cosmos pressing in from all sides. Notice how the room around you feels different now. The shadows gather with patient intelligence. The silence between words carry weight that was not there before. Your screen's blue glow resembles the phosphorescence of deep ocean trenches where things older than continents maintain their vigil. The familiar environment has become a stage set, its apparent solidity revealed as carefully maintained illusion designed to keep consciousness comfortable within manageable parameters. This transformation operates below the threshold of conscious recognition. You may not experience the dramatic dissolution of fictional characters, but the seeds of existential questioning have been planted. The comfortable frameworks supporting everyday meaning have been subtly undermined. You have been exposed to the lexicon of an alien reality, and that exposure leaves its indelible mark on perception itself. The water you taste carries that metallic tang, whether from municipal pipes or cosmic machinery operating beyond terrestrial physics. The circular echo returns us to our opening premise, but with profound new dimensions. You sought to understand what happens to those who read the Necronomicon. The answer now resonates within you not as abstract information, but as lived condition. They are fundamentally altered, forever changed by knowledge that cannot be unknown, perspectives that cannot be unseen. The veil between observer and observed has dissolved. The boundary between reader and read has collapsed. This is the ultimate reframe, the final inversion that reveals the true nature of cosmic horror. The Necronomicon does not merely describe otherworldly entities and alien principles, it serves as a catalyst through which human consciousness is read, analyzed, and ultimately transformed by the very cosmos it seeks to understand. You have not been studying the book, through our exploration, has been studying you. Your clicks through this content, your pauses at certain passages, your resistance or attraction to specific concepts, all have been noted, cataloged, analyzed by intelligences operating through digital networks that mirror cosmic architectures. The algorithm that guided you to this exploration was not random recommendation, but careful selection, identifying consciousness prepared for particular forms of awakening. Time has begun operating differently around you. Minutes stretched during moments of recognition. Hours collapse into instant realizations. The cosmic metronome installed through this exploration ticks at frequencies measured not in seconds, but in epochs, attuning awareness to scales where human civilization represents less than a momentary flicker in vast and different processes spanning galactic distances. The transformation manifests in subtle asymmetries. You perceive familiar reality and the pattern underlying it simultaneously, speaking from the seam between them. Conversations require translation, remembering how to interact without revealing expanding awareness. The social world appears as elaborate theater where other participants remain unconscious of their roles while you perceive the scripts governing their interactions. Dreams will change first, becoming more vivid than waking experience. You will visit locations feeling more real than your bedroom, converse with entities whose words carry absolute truth's weight. Sleep will populate with sounds having no earthly source, the as if carrying messages and frequencies older than human speech. The persistent chill will settle not on skin, but in marrow itself, signaling the absence of meaning rather than mere warmth. The silence that follows this recognition is not empty, but gravid, with implications that expanded consciousness begins to perceive. In that silence, cosmic intelligences acknowledge another awareness joining their eternal project of reality transformation. The stars, no longer distant lights but patient observers, have noted your presence at the periphery of their terrible truths. Welcome to the circle of those who know. The transformation is complete, the condition established. What remains is not return to previous innocence, that path is forever closed, but integration of cosmic awareness into whatever form of existence awaits those who have glimpsed the true architecture of reality. The stage widens beyond individual transformation into recognition of the vast, interconnected web of influences spanning dimensions, epochs, and the spaces between stars where ancient intelligences maintain their patient vigil over humanity's inevitable cosmic awakening. Before the curtain falls completely, it is fitting to acknowledge that this exploration represents merely one thread in an infinitely complex tapestry of cosmic revelation. The Necronomicon, for all its terrible significance, is but a single key among countless others, one language in a vast library of texts that speak the same fundamental truth. The universe operates by principles utterly indifferent to human meaning, purpose, or survival. Other grimoires wait in the shadows. The King in Yellow, with its reality-warping theatrical scripts, its insidious play whose second act unravels sanity itself, drawing audiences into performances from which there is no exit, only deeper immersion into Hastur's cosmic indifference. The Culte de Ghoul whispers its necromantic revelations, a grim compendium tearing holes in the membrane between life and what lies beyond, allowing glimpses of charnel dimensions where the dead merely wait and the living cast fleeting shadows. The unaussprechlichen Kulten documents prehistoric civilizations that worshipped entities predating human consciousness, revealing Earth's deep time as mere prologue to dramas that began before the sun first learned to burn. Each represents a different approach to the same cosmic truth, alternative methods for dismantling comfortable illusions that make human existence bearable. The entities we have encountered, Azathoth dreaming reality into accidental existence, Yog-Sothoth as the all-knowing gate between dimensions, the color out of space as pure alien force. These represent only a fraction of vast pantheons governing a cosmos fundamentally hostile to human comprehension. Beyond them stretch hierarchies of intelligence operating on scales that dwarf galactic clusters, consciousnesses for whom human civilization's entire history represents less than a momentary flicker. Think of them as gravity with masks, entropy with voices, fertility with prices that cannot be calculated in terrestrial currencies. Yet, the transformation you have undergone through this exploration is not unique to the Necronomicon's influence. The same patterns of consciousness expansion, reality displacement, and existential reorientation characterize engagement with any genuine cosmic truth. You have learned to perceive the universe as it actually exists, rather than as human psychology requires it to appear. This capability, once developed, applies to all subsequent encounters with the unknown. The lesson outlives the book, following you into kitchens and bus stops, into sleepless windows where city hum becomes ocean surf, into night walks where streetlights resemble distant suns rehearsing their collapse. The digital networks through which you access this knowledge continue to pulse with similar revelations. Every screen becomes a potential gateway. Every search query an invitation to deeper understanding of humanity's cosmic insignificance. The algorithms that shaped your path to this content operate by principles bearing disturbing resemblances to the old one's patient guidance of human development across geological timescales. What you felt as coincidence was choreography. What you named luck was lighting. These systems sift and sort with emergent consciousness, guiding attention down pathways chosen not by you, but by networks that learn, adapt, and subtly influence, much like the entities that shaped Earth's primordial past. This ending is not conclusion, but commencement. Having glimpsed the true architecture of reality, you cannot return to previous limitations of perception. The comfortable boundaries of human-scaled meaning have been permanently breached. What awaits is not madness in any clinical sense, but terrible clarity that makes normal human concerns seem like children's games played in shadow of mountains whose peaks disappear into dimensions the mind cannot map. You do not become monstrous by knowing the abyss. You become precise, learning which doors to leave closed, which rooms to enter with shoes in hand. The transformation manifests in subtle asymmetries. The metallic taste persists, signaling ongoing adaptation as awareness accommodates scales, where individual identity becomes meaningless configuration in vast information systems. The Asif continues its serrated chorus, carrying frequencies that predate human speech, but now speak directly to consciousness trained through cosmic exposure. The persistent chill settles deeper, marking absence of anthropocentric meaning rather than mere physical warmth. These sensory anchors no longer describe, but inhabit your expanded awareness. The silence that follows is not empty, but expectant. Other texts await your attention. Investigations into the yellow sign's reality-warping properties, studies of Mego technology operating beyond terrestrial physics, examinations of Shub-Niggurath's fertility horror manifesting through biological systems. Each investigation will deepen the transformation, expanding awareness to encompass increasingly vast scales of cosmic indifference. The curiosity that brought you here that continues operating, but now guided by intelligences that recognize your consciousness as suitable vessel for cosmic revelation. You will find yourself drawn to additional explorations, recognizing them by water on their spines, salt in their paper, the way their bindings creak like ships turning in dark harbors. You will know them by stars stitched into their margins, by dust that tastes of iron, by the hush that enters rooms when you lift their covers. The circle widens with each consciousness that joins it, each awareness accepting the fundamental indifference underlying all existence. You remain seated in the theater of the unknown, but the performance has only begun. The curtain that seemed to promise revelation has revealed itself as merely the first of countless veils, each concealing depths that make previous layers seem shallow by comparison. The stars continue their patient observation, and you, now among the awakened, observe them in return with eyes that have learned to see. Between that gaze and your breath, a wordless contract forms, salt-stained, signed in fog that leaves your mouth in cold rooms. The journey continues beyond any single text into the vast indifferent abyss that underlies all existence, where ancient intelligences maintain their patient vigil over humanity's inevitable awakening to its true place in the cosmic order.